The sun burned high above the alien Colosseum. Its golden light spread across the sand of the great arena where countless battles had been fought. Stone walls curved high, filled with thousands of alien spectators. They roared, laughed, and shouted, their strange voices echoing like thunder. At the very center of this stage stood a single figure, a human girl. She was small compared to the massive gates, smaller still compared to the towering aliens in the crowd. Her dark hair was tied back, her face pale but steady. Her fists trembled, but not from fear. She clenched them so tight her nails bit into her skin. The announcer's booming voice shook the walls. His alien tongue twisted into cruel words that the translation device carried into the ears of all. Today, the galaxy will see the weakness of Earth. Today, the human will fall. The crowd erupted in laughter. Their voices carried mockery, calling her fragile, calling her prey, calling her worthless. Some spat from the stands, others threw scraps onto the sand. Across from her, the heavy gate opened. Dust rolled out with the rumble of chains. From the shadows emerged her opponent. He was massive, an alien warrior with skin like stone, shoulders broad, arms bulging with muscle. His armor glowed faintly with alien energy. In his hand, he carried a jagged weapon that shimmered red in the sun. The crowd screamed his name. He lifted his weapon high, and the Colosseum seemed to shake with excitement. He looked down at the human girl with eyes full of cruel amusement. So this is humanity's best. He growled, his voice deep as thunder. A child? A fragile insect? The girl's heart pounded in her chest, each beat like a drum of war. But she did not look away. Her eyes locked onto his, unblinking, unbroken. The alien took a step forward, his shadow falling across her. "When I crush you," he said, "your bones will not even make a sound. Weak creatures like you do not belong in battle." The crowd cheered louder, feeding on his words. Their laughter cut through the air like knives. The girl stood silent. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. She wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong, but the weight of the arena pressed on her chest. Her body felt heavy, her throat dry. The announcer's voice rose again. "The fight begins!" The alien roared, raising his weapon, and charged. His steps shook the sand. Each stomp was a hammer against the earth. He swung his weapon down with all his force, aiming to crush her in one blow. The girl barely moved in time. The blade slammed into the ground beside her, throwing sand into the air. The shockwave knocked her off her feet. She hit the ground hard, dust filling her lungs. The crowd howled with laughter, pointing at her as she scrambled to her knees. "Pathetic," shouted someone from the stands. "End it quickly." The alien warrior pulled his weapon free, grinning. "See," he shouted to the crowd. "The human falls before even the first strike." The laughter grew louder, a storm of voices mocking her, drowning her in noise. She pressed her palms into the sand, her arms shaking as she pushed herself up. Blood trickled from her lip where she had bitten down, but her eyes were fire. The alien swung again, faster this time, but she rolled aside. The weapon carved a line in the sand where she had just been. The crowd gasped, surprised at her escape, but quickly returned to laughter. She stood again, her chest rising and falling, her fists clenched. The alien towered over her, confident, proud, certain of victory. "You should not be here," he said, his voice mocking. "Humans are too weak for the arena." "You are nothing," the girl finally spoke. Her voice was low, cracked with pain, but steady. "We are not nothing." The alien tilted his head, amused. "Then show me." He rushed again, his weapon a blur of red and steel. She moved with instinct, ducking under the swing, the blade passing inches above her head. Sand sprayed into her face, stinging her eyes. She blinked, vision blurred, but her body moved. She had no choice. It was fight or die. Her foot struck the alien's leg as he passed, a small blow but enough to stumble his step. He snarled, surprised. The crowd gasped again. Though many laughed it off as chance, the girl wiped blood from her mouth, her chest heaving. Her arms ached, her legs burned, but something inside her would not let her quit. The crowd shouted for her defeat, shouted for her death, but their voices no longer crushed her. Instead, their laughter became fuel. Their insults became fire in her veins. She looked up at the alien, her lips curling into the smallest of smiles. "You call me weak," she said softly, "but I am still standing." The alien roared, furious. He charged again, swinging wildly, eager to silence her voice. Each strike tore the air with deadly force. Each step made the ground tremble, but she moved. Slow at first, clumsy, but then quicker. She began to see his rhythm, his pattern. He was powerful, but predictable. He relied on strength, not on thought. The crowd noticed too. Their laughter grew uncertain. Whispers began to spread. Some leaned forward, eyes wide. The girl's body screamed in pain, but her mind was sharp now. Every breath was survival. Every step was purpose. The alien slammed his weapon into the sand again, and again she avoided it. The arena floor was broken with deep cracks where his fury had landed, and then silence. The girl stood tall, chest heaving, covered in dirt and blood but unbroken. The alien glared at her, his pride wounded. The crowd fell quiet, waiting. She raised her chin and whispered to herself, almost too low to hear, "This is not the end. This is only the beginning." The arena, once filled with laughter, now held its breath. The air in the arena was heavy. The laughter of the crowd had softened into whispers. What began as mockery was now uneasy silence. The alien warrior, huge and armored, growled in frustration. His pride had been touched. A human, a creature he had called weak, still stood before him. He stomped across the sand, his weapon glowing red with fury. "You are nothing," he shouted, his voice echoing through the Colosseum. "I will crush you now, and all will remember that humans break like glass." But the girl did not tremble this time. Her body was sore, her arms cut and bruised, yet something inside her had awakened. Her eyes followed him closely, her breath slow, steady, waiting. The alien charged, swinging down with crushing force. The sand exploded where his weapon landed, but she rolled to the side. Dust clouded the air. The crowd gasped, their eyes locked on the fragile figure who kept escaping death. The alien raised his weapon again, striking faster, angrier. The girl moved each time, barely escaping, her steps clumsy but sharp with instinct. She was not winning yet, but she was not losing either. That alone was enough to shake the arena. Her chest rose and fell, sweat mixed with dirt on her skin. Every dodge burned her lungs. Every movement tore at her aching muscles. But her mind was alive. With each swing she avoided, she saw more. His swings were too wide, his armor too heavy, his steps too slow. He was strong, yes, but strength was not everything. The alien raised his weapon for another killing blow. This time the girl did not step back. She stepped forward. The crowd screamed, certain she had lost her mind. The blade came down with deadly speed, but she was already moving under it. The edge brushed her shoulder, cutting skin, but she ignored the pain. She was inside his guard now, close enough to strike. Her fist shot forward, small and fragile compared to his massive body, but it connected with his ribs. The sound was dull, but the alien staggered. His armor cracked slightly at the point of impact. The crowd erupted, not with laughter this time, but with shock. The girl had struck back. The alien growled in disbelief. His eyes widened as he touched the small crack in his armor. "Impossible," he snarled. "You should be broken." The girl wiped blood from her lip, her voice steady despite the pain. "Humans do not break so easily." He roared and swung again, wild with rage. The girl ducked low, sand scraping against her skin, and struck his leg with a sharp kick. He stumbled again, more off balance this time. The crowd leaned forward, their whispers growing louder. Some cheered for the alien still, but others began to murmur words they had never spoken before in this place. "The human fights back." She circled him now, her breathing hard, but her eyes sharp. The alien swung again and again, but with each dodge she grew more confident. She was no longer prey running from a predator. She was the hunter learning the beast's weakness. Her mind raced back to Earth, to the stories of her people. Humans had always been underestimated. They had faced giants, beasts, storms, and wars, and survived. That same blood flowed in her now. The alien lunged with his weapon, but she sidestepped and slammed her elbow into his side where his armor was weakest. He howled in pain, stumbling to one knee. The crowd gasped again. This time, they did not laugh. The girl stepped back, her chest rising and falling, her fists trembling not with fear but with energy. She had landed not one, but two clean blows. The alien warrior, so proud, so mighty, had been forced down to his knee by a human girl. The silence in the arena was sharp now, almost louder than the earlier laughter. The crowd did not know whether to cheer or to fear. The alien rose slowly, his eyes burning with rage. Blood dripped from the crack in his armor. His voice was low, shaking with anger. "You will regret that." The girl said nothing. She only raised her fists again. He swung, but his strikes grew reckless. He wanted to end it quickly, to restore his pride. But the more he swung, the more he missed. The girl's body was cut and bruised, but she was faster now, sharper, each dodge calculated. Finally, she saw her chance. As his weapon came down, she caught his wrist with both hands, twisting with all the strength she had left. The alien roared in surprise, his weapon slipping from his grip. The blade crashed into the sand, useless. The crowd exploded with noise, half in shock, half in disbelief. A human had disarmed one of their greatest warriors. The girl stood, blood running down her arm, her legs trembling, but her eyes fierce. She held her ground while the alien stared at her, stunned. She whispered, almost too softly for the crowd to hear, but the words carried, "Who is weak now?" The arena shook with the sound of the crowd. Some shouted in anger, others in awe. But one truth now spread across every corner of the Colosseum. The human was no longer a victim. She was a fighter. The alien roared in fury and charged barehanded. But in the hearts of all watching, something had already changed. For the first time in history, a human had struck back, and the galaxy would never forget it. The arena was alive with noise. Some of the alien crowd shouted for the warrior to destroy her. Others remained silent, unable to believe what they had just seen. A human girl, small, fragile, mocked as weak, had disarmed one of their strongest fighters. The alien warrior's chest rose and fell with fury. His eyes blazed red as he bared his teeth, his pride wounded deeper than his body. He had expected an easy victory, one strike to prove humans worthless. But now his weapon lay buried in the sand, and the human still stood. He stepped forward with a roar, swinging his massive fists. His hands were like hammers, strong enough to shatter stone. The girl barely dodged the first strike, the wind of it brushing her face. The second strike grazed her side, tearing cloth and skin. Pain burned her body, but she did not fall. She staggered back, her breath heavy, her body bruised and bloodied. Yet there was something new in her eyes, something the crowd had never seen before. It was not fear, it was defiance. The alien laughed cruelly. "You bleed. You suffer. You are weak after all." The girl's lips parted, and though her voice was quiet, it carried across the arena. "Weak does not mean broken." The crowd stirred, uneasy at her words. No human had ever spoken like this in the arena. The alien charged again, raising his fists high. But the girl no longer backed away. She remembered Earth, the storms, the hunger, the wars her ancestors survived. Humanity had always been fragile compared to the monsters they faced. But fragility did not mean defeat. Fragility meant adaptation. Fragility meant resilience. The alien's fist came down. She moved with speed she did not know she had, stepping aside and striking his knee. It was a small blow, but precise. The alien roared as his leg buckled slightly. The crowd gasped. A few even shouted in surprise. The girl's chest heaved. Her knuckles throbbed with pain, but she felt something rise inside her, a fire, a strength hidden deep in her blood, born of struggle, born of survival. The alien turned, his rage boiling. He swung wildly now, desperate to crush her before his shame grew larger. Each swing was faster, harder, but less controlled. The girl dodged, rolled, and slipped past him. Every escape sharpened her movements. Every second fed her confidence. She struck again, this time at his ribs. Her fist landed with a crack against the already weakened armor. The alien stumbled, grunting in pain. The arena echoed with gasps. The crowd that once laughed now leaned forward, eyes wide. She stood tall, dirt and blood covering her, but her voice was steady. "Humans are more than you think," her opponent snarled, lunging forward in blind fury. But the girl had seen his weakness. His strength was great, but his pride was greater. He underestimated her still. As he rushed, she dropped low, using his own momentum against him. Her foot slammed into his ankle, sending him crashing forward onto the sand. The ground shook as the mighty warrior fell. The Colosseum erupted in chaos. Some aliens screamed in outrage, others shouted in awe. The impossible had happened again. The human had thrown down the giant. The girl's body screamed with pain, every muscle burning, every cut stinging. But she stood tall above him. For the first time, the crowd was not mocking her. They were watching her, truly watching. The alien pushed himself up, his voice trembling with fury. "No, no human can do this." But she met his eyes, her own steady and unyielding. "We can, and we will." The arena fell into silence, the crowd holding its breath. The alien rose again, his pride now broken. His strikes grew desperate, reckless. He lunged with everything he had left. But the girl no longer fought as prey. She fought with the strength of every human who had ever been underestimated, with the will of her ancestors, who had survived when survival seemed impossible. Her fists struck again, sharper, faster. She landed blow after blow, her movements no longer clumsy but precise, each one aimed at the cracks in his armor. With every strike, the alien stumbled. The crowd's whispers grew into a roar, not of laughter but of disbelief. Some shouted for her to finish it. Others screamed for their warrior to rise. But all knew one truth. The human girl had changed the fight. She pushed forward, her body weak but her spirit burning. Her voice echoed through the arena as she struck again. "Humanity does not bow." Her fist landed hard, and the alien staggered back, blood spilling from his mouth. The once proud warrior now looked shaken, his strength no longer certain. The girl stood, chest heaving, her small frame against his massive form. And for the first time, the crowd saw not weakness, but power. The arena trembled with noise, not from mockery, but from the weight of history being written in blood and sand. The weak human was no longer weak. The arena pulsed with noise, a storm of voices clashing against each other. Some shouted for the alien warrior to rise and crush the human. Others whispered in disbelief, their eyes locked on the fragile girl who refused to fall. The alien's breath came heavy now, his chest rising and falling like a beast cornered. His armor was cracked, his pride bleeding faster than his wounds. He wiped blood from his mouth and glared at the human girl. His fury burned hotter than the desert sun above them. "You should already be dead," he roared. His voice thundered through the Colosseum. "I will end you now." The girl stood across from him, her arms trembling, her body covered in cuts and dirt. But her eyes were sharp as blades. They no longer showed fear. They carried something deeper, something ancient, the quiet strength of a species that had always been underestimated. The alien raised his weapon again. He had retrieved it from the sand, gripping it tightly with bloodied hands. The red blade glowed as if hungry for her life. The crowd rose to their feet. They wanted blood. They wanted an end. The warrior charged, faster than before, fury giving him new strength. His weapon came down in a deadly arc, glowing against the sunlight. Dust exploded into the air as it struck. The ground cracked where it landed, shaking the entire arena. For a long second, no one could see her. The crowd gasped. Some shouted in triumph, certain she'd been crushed. But when the dust cleared, she was still standing. The girl held half of his broken weapon in her hands. The blade had snapped on impact, shattered by the force she redirected when she twisted her body at the last moment. She stood there, panting, dirt and blood covering her, gripping the jagged half of the weapon like it was her own. The crowd fell silent. Silence so deep it was louder than all their laughter before. The alien staggered back, disbelief on his face. "No, this cannot be." The girl's voice was low, steady, and it carried through the still air. "Humans do not break. We endure." The silence broke into chaos. Half the crowd screamed in outrage, others shouted in awe. Never before had a human done this. The alien roared and threw himself at her, fists swinging like storms. Each strike was enough to shatter bone, but she no longer moved as prey. She moved with purpose, slipping under his blows, striking back with sharp, precise hits. Her jagged weapon cut across his arm, leaving a deep gash. He howled, blood spilling across the sand. The arena floor became a battlefield of sweat, dust, and blood. The alien swung with all his strength, but his rage blinded him. The girl struck his weak points again and again, his knees, his ribs, his unguarded jaw. Every strike she landed carried not just her strength, but the strength of her people. Humanity's spirit lived in her fists, her blood, her voice. The alien stumbled back, his body shaking. His eyes no longer held only rage. Now for the first time they carried fear. The girl's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. Her voice came out raw but unshaken. "You called me weak. But weakness is not what you see now," the crowd roared. They were no longer laughing. They were witnessing history. The alien made one final charge, his pride refusing to surrender. He screamed, his fists raised high. The girl tightened her grip on the broken weapon and ran toward him. The arena froze in that moment, two figures racing across the sand. One a giant of brute strength, the other a fragile human girl. Battered and bloodied, they collided with a force that shook the ground. The alien's fist came down, but the girl twisted aside, sliding under his arm. She rose behind him, driving the jagged blade deep into the crack in his armor. The warrior screamed, his voice shaking the arena. His massive body staggered, his fists swinging wildly, but the girl held on, pushing with every ounce of strength left in her. The blade tore deeper. His knees buckled. The crowd screamed, some in horror, some in triumph, and then he fell. The alien's body crashed into the sand, his roar dying in his throat. The girl stood above him, the broken weapon dripping with his blood, her chest heaving with exhaustion. The arena was silent once more. Thousands of eyes stared at her, wide and unblinking. She looked around at them, her face streaked with dirt and blood, her eyes burning like fire. Slowly, she raised the weapon high into the air. The silence shattered into a storm of voices. Some screamed in fury, others in awe, but all knew one truth. The weak human had turned the fight. The turning point had come. She was no longer a victim in their arena. She was a warrior, and the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. The arena had never been so silent. Dust floated in the sunlight, drifting over the broken sand where two figures faced each other. One was the alien warrior, once proud and invincible, now on his knees, his body torn and bleeding. The other was the human girl, small and fragile in appearance, but standing tall with the jagged piece of his shattered weapon in her hand. Every eye in the Colosseum was fixed on her. Thousands of aliens filled the stone seats, their voices caught in their throats. They had come expecting entertainment, expecting laughter at the weakness of a human. Instead, they had been forced to watch something none of them could deny, strength where they thought there was none. The alien warrior growled through bloody teeth. His voice trembled with rage and shame. "You will never be more than prey. Even now you are weak." The girl's chest rose and fell, her body covered in cuts and blood. She could barely keep herself upright, every step heavy with pain. But her eyes burned with something greater than pain. Her voice, though raw, carried clear across the arena. "Then watch what weakness can do." The crowd stirred. Whispers echoed like ripples across water. The alien tried to rise, his pride unwilling to let him fall in front of so many. He roared, pushing against the ground, but his legs shook and his strength failed. He was not the hunter anymore. He was the hunted. The girl stepped forward, each movement slow but filled with purpose. She gripped the jagged blade tighter. The alien swung one last desperate fist, but she ducked low, slipped behind him, and with all the fury she carried, she drove the blade deep into his back. His scream tore through the Colosseum, a sound of pain and disbelief. The crowd gasped as blood spilled across the sand. His body shook, then fell forward with a heavy crash that shook the ground. But the girl did not stop. Her hands gripped tighter, pulling with all her strength. Her arms trembled, her teeth clenched, her body screamed in agony. And then, with a final cry, she ripped free his spine, the bones long and brutal, the skull still attached at the end. The crowd erupted, not with laughter this time, but with shock, with fear, with awe. Thousands of voices filled the air, a storm of sound that shook the very walls of the Colosseum. The girl stood above the fallen body, her chest heaving, her arms raised high. The alien's spine hung from her grip, dripping with blood, gleaming in the sunlight. She turned slowly, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. Every alien who had mocked her, every voice that had called her weak, now stared back in silence. Her voice rang out cold and sharp as steel. Remember this: humanity is not weak. Humanity endures. Humanity fights. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Even the announcer, who had shouted so proudly at the start, stood frozen, his voice lost. The crowd that once spat at her now sat trembling, unsure if they had just witnessed a fighter's victory or the birth of a legend. Some tried to shout insults, but their words faltered. Others whispered in hushed tones, as if afraid she might hear. A few, hidden among the masses, even raised their fists in silent respect. The alien guards along the arena walls shifted uneasily. They had come to watch a simple fight, but now they looked at her with caution. This was no longer sport. This was something greater. The girl dropped the broken blade and held the spine higher. Her body shook, her knees nearly buckled, but her spirit did not bend. Her eyes shone with fire as she spoke once more. Today you saw what one human can do. Tomorrow you will see what all of us can do. The words struck the crowd harder than any weapon. They carried across the arena, echoing in the hearts of all who heard them. The alien warrior lay dead at her feet, his pride shattered, his body nothing more than a reminder. The girl had not just fought for herself. She had fought for her people, for every human who had ever been called weak. The arena floor, soaked in blood, was no longer a place of shame for humanity. It had become the ground where a new truth was born. The girl lowered the spine slowly, her arms finally giving way. Her body swayed, exhausted, ready to collapse. But before she fell, the crowd erupted again, not in laughter, not in mockery, but in something new: fear, respect, history. For the first time in the galaxy, the aliens looked at a human and did not see fragility. They saw danger. They saw strength hidden in flesh and bone. The girl fell to her knees at last, the spine still in her grip. Her blood stained the sand, but her eyes stayed open, locked on the sky above. She whispered one final truth, not for the crowd, but for herself. We are not weak. We never were. The arena shook with the weight of her victory, and from that day forward, the galaxy would never again look at humanity the same way.